Welcome to my backyard garden. Today I'm going to start my tomatoes, and I'm going to start my tomatoes this year in soil blocks. This is my mini soil block maker. It makes slightly under 3/4 inch soil blocks, and in here you'll see it's got these little nubs there. Those are what leaves a little indentation in each block to put your seeds in. This is my seed starting mix. If you didn't see how I put this together, then I'll leave a link to the video on that at the end of this video. This is the tray that's made specifically for these soil blocks, and you see it's lattice work on the bottom, and that just sits in a normal cell tray. All right, so we have to get the seed starting mix wet, and you need it wet enough so that this mix binds together and doesn't fall apart. And can't get it too wet, because if it's too wet it gets soupy and it won't hold together. So I found that my ratio of 3 parts of the mix and 1 part water works really well. I've got 4 cups here. I'm going to pour about 1.5 cups of water in here and mix it up, and we'll see how it goes. All right, that's getting mixed up pretty good. Now I use boiling water in this, and the reason you want to use boiling water is the hot water will kill off any bacteria, fungus, or anything else that you don't want in your mix. I'm just going to let that sit for a while and cool off. Okay, first I put a little bit more water in here. See how it's kind of puddling just a little bit on the surface? That's the consistency you want. Now, I already made 1 set of blocks, and all you do is you go in here and you work it in really well and push it down in there. Now sometimes it doesn't quite go down as well, and if that's the case, use the spoon. So we get that on here, push it in really well. You can't use too much of the mix when you're doing this. And then all you do is just take a little knife and slice off the bottom of that and make your blocks. Now I'm going to go here and I give it a little compression there and then lift it off. There's my blocks. Okay, that was it. All I had to do now is push the seeds down into the mix a little bit better so they make better contact and they'll sprout. Now, not all of these seeds will sprout. However, that's why I planted so many. Hey, one more thing about watering. You want to use a spray bottle and just spray these on a misting setting. You don't want to squirt them, and you don't want to pour water on top of the blocks because they'll dissolve. The other option is to lift this tray out, pour water underneath there in the tray, and then set this back in, but you don't want to put too much water in there again, because if the water level is too high, these blocks will just dissolve. Okay, now I have 12 cells. I picked out my 12 best plants. One thing you want to make sure you do before you transplant anything is to screen your potting soil. And the reason you want to do that is because you end up with your potting soil all kinds of stuff like twigs, rocks, things like that that you don't want in your cells. Okay, here's how you do it. I'm just going to break up that block a little bit. Use my wooden spoon. Just going to make a little hole in here. You can use anything else. Chopsticks might work good. Lay this across here. Now these stems are pretty sturdy, so you don't have to really worry too much about breaking them, but you don't want to just jam them in there. Just push it down like that. Get the rest of the roots in there, and you're done. Okay, ready to put outside. A couple things. Remember, sift your potting soil in 1/4 inch hardware cloth to remove all the stones and the twigs to make it easier so you can push those tomatoes or any other plants you have into that mix. Don't compact this potting soil. Once you put them in the cells, you want it nice and fluffy and easy to push those plants down into, especially the tomatoes. Today I'm going to transplant my tomatoes from this 2-inch cells into this 12-inch cup. I'm going to pop these up into the cups, and in a couple 3 weeks I'm going to put them out in the garden, but I'm going to do a couple things here to get them ready for that. All right, first thing you want to do is you want to squeeze in the cells, because I want to get as much as the root system out and loosen this up. Put a little bit of potting soil in there, because that's where I want this to go. I want the soil to go all the way up to this first set of true leaves. These are not true leaves. I'm going to get rid of those. Put this back down here. Then all I'm going to do is fill up this cup. Make a mess while I'm doing it. Styrofoam has a tendency to attract that dirt. So that's all you need to do, just potting soil. And the reason why I want to cover this all the way up to the first true leaves is when you look at this right there, all these little hairs along here develop into roots if they're buried. So I'm going to bury these all the way up to the first true leaves, because when I transplant these out, I want to have as much of the stem and the root system as I can, putting them out into the garden. After I've potted everything into the cups, I'm going to put them in this 64 quart tote. The advantage with that is I can pick them up, carry them around, don't have to worry about them spilling out all over the place, and I can put a lid on them too. If it gets too cold at night, below 40, I'm going to bring them in, set them just inside the patio door, and I can put that lid on and stack them so they don't take up so much space. So that's all there is to it. Last thing to do is just water them in really well. You notice I put little punched little holes in the bottom of the cups so they'll drain. You don't want them to hold on to the water. It'll rot the roots and kill the plants. Beginning of June, and it's time to put my tomatoes out into the garden. First thing I'm going to do, I marked off where I'm going to put each of my tomatoes. I spaced my tomatoes 10 inches apart. I have room for 11 tomatoes going across here. I have my big beef variety, which is called Jetstar, and over here I've got pear and cherry tomatoes. I'm going to pick the largest one of my pear and cherry because I only need one of each plant, and I'm going to pick the 9 best. Okay, so this is where my first tomato is going to go. I have two options. I can dig a deep hole, or I can dig a trench. I don't want to dig a deep hole. I'm just going to dig a trench, and I'm going to dig the trench diagonally. The reason why I'm going to do that is I'm going to get as much of this stem down into that ground as possible, because everywhere this stem is buried, it's going to develop a roots, and it's going to develop a great root system if I do this trench like that. All right, so what I need to do is I'm just going to go underneath this. I don't want to go any more than halfway because I don't want to interfere with my lettuce, but I've got to get a pretty good trench down here. Now, the tomato, when I put my rack up, the rack's going to come about here across the garden. So this is where I want my tomato to come out of the ground. And I want to get this down pretty good. That's about 4 inches right there, 4 or 5 inches. All right, so what I'm going to do is take my cherry tomato, squeeze the cup so it all comes out just like that. And I'm going to lay this down here. Now, everything that's going to be buried, I'm going to take these leaves out. This one too. Now, you might say this is going to look bad because it's laying down. And what's going to happen is I'm going to bury this, and then this plant will turn up and turn up to the sunlight. So I'm just going to bury it. Whoops. One thing I forgot. Don't want to forget this. So let's just dig this out a little bit more. This. Now, it's not black pepper, obviously. This is blended eggshells. I've crushed and blended these in a blender, and this is going to be a source of calcium so that I don't have to worry about blossom end rot. Blossom end rot is caused in peppers and tomatoes by a lack of calcium. So I'm going to sprinkle this out. The reason I do that with the blender is because it breaks it down for the plants. That should be enough. Now I'm going to cover this up. And that's where I want my plant. Right here. Everything that's covered up by dirt is going to have roots. Okay, now the next thing is dried blood. I'm going to sprinkle this down here. Oops, that's a lot. Maybe a lot, maybe not. So I'm going to sprinkle that down, spread it out a little bit over the top of the roots. Because what will happen is, as you water that and it rains, that'll soak down and dissolve into the ground and help, and that's a good source of nitrogen. Alright, so I have to put this piece of wood in here. This is just a regular piece of wood I cut, I don't know, it's 2 inches square, drill some holes, and this hole right here, the rebar will go down through, and this is why. If I just put this pipe on the ground like this, the weight of the tomatoes would eventually make it sink into the ground, just like that, and everything would sag, and I'd have to just keep adjusting my tomatoes on the line. So the pipe will sit right there over the rebar, just like that, and become really stable. Okay, so I put my rebar through the hole. I want about maybe a foot or so left over for the pipe to go down onto. And you notice I've angled it in toward the bed because I need pressure on the top of the pipe to hold everything together on the cross pieces. All right, so I've got my 2 side supports in. I'm going to need a center support too, because a 10-foot length, which is how long this bed is, isn't going to support these very well. The pipe will sag. I don't want any sagging on my support. So I laid my 2 5-foot cross pieces down, and this is where that's going to go. A center support's going to go right in there. Alright, that's what we look like. There's a lot of tension on this right here. You don't normally you would screw this in here and here. Don't even need to because it's not going anywhere. This T will be fine. Right there. Fits pretty good. And of course that T connector is good. And this lines up pretty much right where the tomatoes are coming out of the ground. And then the next thing I have to do is string them up. Just to show you what this is. It's a 1/16 of an inch, probably, nylon cord. All you're going to do is take it and tie a little loop. Just like that. Need a loop. Because that is going to go inside the hook. And that's how you're going to anchor your tomatoes to the ground. Right, then you take your cord and you're going to go about an extra foot from the pipe, cross piece, and straight up from the tomato. All you're going to do is tie a little Boy Scout knot. So you go inside and go down, and you keep looping it again just like that, so it comes out the other side, and do that one more time. This is how you tied up your tents, and you can just tighten the tension like that, and there you go. Okay, then the last thing you have to do is wrap these tomatoes around the line. You get right down here, here's the line, and see how I've wrapped it around the twine. You just want to be careful that you don't break off the top of the plant, so you just want to be gentle with these things. Nice thing about this is I can use it every year, over and over again. The pipes won't degrade. The nylon cord will last for years. All I have to do is untie the top, put it away, and use it next year. This thing takes like 5 minutes to set up. There's two things that I do when I'm pruning my tomatoes. First of all, I'm going to prune some leaves off to help with air circulation around the plant, especially around the bottom of the plant. Pruning the leaves off the bottom of the plant will help reduce the risk of disease. If the soil is wet, leaves are touching the soil, it'll transmit soil-borne diseases to the plant. Don't want that. If they're too close to the ground also, when it rains, the rains could splash those organisms up onto the leaves as well and create disease also. So I don't want to do that either. So I want to get the bottom of this plant pruned so that it'll stay healthier and reduce the risk of soil-borne diseases. The other reason I want to prune this is the suckers. Suckers are secondary plants coming off the main stem. And the way you identify a sucker is there's a leaf and the elbow with the leaf and the main stem here, and this is the sucker. So the sucker has a growth head here. This will continue to grow until you stop it. So I'm going to take this sucker off, and it's really important to get these suckers because, first of all, I just think they suck the life out of your plant. They don't really, but you don't want them on there, because when I use the single stem method, single stalk method, up my rope here, up my line, I just want one single plant growing up this line, and I don't want them going all over the place. Here's the leaf, there's the elbow, and here's the stem. Then you've got tomatoes. Then you go up a leaf, there's another sucker. Now the smaller ones, you can just pinch off and do it that way. Now, every 1-2 leaves, you're going to get more tomatoes. Yep, there we go, right up there. So here's another sucker. I'm going to get rid of that. The reason you don't want to try to break these off is you could damage the stem. Don't want to damage the stem, so I'm just going to cut that off. When you get up to the top of the plant, you want to be careful. I don't touch anything at the top of the plant. I'm going to stay away from this growth head, because in the past I've made a mistake and cut that growth head off, and that's all the plant you get. And so it significantly reduces your harvest. So, and then the other part of this is I'm going to take this and snip off the bottom leaves. There's another sucker right there. Take that leaf off. I'm going to get rid of all these leaves. There you go. Yep, one more. Let's do that. And that. So now you can see I've cut up about maybe 8 inches from the ground. I'll get that out of there. 8 inches from the dirt all the way up here. So this will be the last leaf. I'm going to leave that one on there, and that's going to produce a healthier plant. I'm going to go over my mid-season pruning techniques I use on my tomatoes. Really important to keep up with the tomatoes. You got suckers, and I also take off these old dead leaves. And then this is a branch that has some tomatoes on it. So that's the pruning I do. I've already done that. You can see here I've taken off some old leaves, a sucker, a leaf branch there, leaf branch here, and it just cleans up your tomatoes. That's what I do to take care of my tomatoes during the season. Get those lower branches off as they die off. And make sure you clip these suckers, because that takes away the energy used to produce these tomatoes. It's September 18th, and this is the last day for the tomatoes. I'm going to pick the rest of these, take the plants out, pull the rack down, put it away for the winter. What I want to do is show you how easy this is with this setup. So I've got my string attached up here, and it was attached down here to the screw, and so I unattached this.
all you're going to have to do is take this tomato, and you take this and you just pull the line up like this, and it comes right up the stalk. Then the tomato falls over, and I've got my lines, and I'm just going to take them off my pole. And all I have to do is store these over the winter. I don't have to retie anything, and in the spring when I put my tomatoes back up, all I have to do is put my rack up and thread these back on the pole, and they're ready to go. The other thing I want to do is show you this root system. Root system on these tomatoes, remember, about here to here, about 6 inches is all I buried under the ground, and they developed all this root system. So that's a really good root system on that tomato plant. Leads to a nice healthy plant and good production. And that's why you bury that stem and just leave maybe 3 or 4 leaves above ground. Hey, hope you like that series of videos that I put all together over the course of the season. If you like the video, give it a like, share it with your friends, leave your comments and questions below. Subscribe to my channel if you would, and ring that bell to get notified of my future videos. I'll be back soon with more stuff. Bye-bye.